Welcome to the Explainer. Have you ever taken a standardized exam, handed in your paper, and walked away just feeling like your true potential, your actual unique smarts, were completely ignored by the grading system? Well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're diving into a fascinating breakdown of human capability that literally shatters how we usually measure intelligence.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Are you actually smarter than your test scores? For decades, we've been handed this traditional notion that there's just a single type of intelligence that defines us. You either have it or you don't. But what if the science actually points in a totally different direction? Let's jump into this and see how a groundbreaking scientific rebuttal completely rewrites the rules.
So right here is our master map for today's explainer. Howard Gardner's 1983 theory of multiple intelligences, which originated from his landmark work, Frames of Mind. We're going to decode every single branch of this flowchart together. We'll start from the foundational theory at the top, navigate our way through the distinct intelligence groups, and finally reach the strict criteria and intense critiques at the bottom.
Here's our roadmap for the journey. 1. Rethinking what smart means. 2. Words, people, and society. 3. Logic, space, and nature. 4. Movement, music, and self. 5. The rules of intelligence. And finally, 6. Moving beyond standard IQ. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Rethinking what smart means. The absolutely crucial foundational point of Gardner's entire theory is this. Intelligence is plural, it is not singular. Gardner's theory proposes that we actually possess 8 independent, biologically grounded capacities. This completely reframes how we view our own brains. It's not just one giant pool of brain power, but rather specific, independent capacities that are literally wired into our biology.
Moving on to Section 2, Words, People, and Society.
Within this verbal and social grouping on our map, we have 2 really distinct capacities. First up is linguistic intelligence, which is biologically grounded right in the left temporal lobe. This is the domain of your poets and writers, people who possess a deep, deep mastery of language. And right next to it is interpersonal intelligence, which relies on the frontal lobes. This is the capacity used heavily by teachers and leaders to deeply understand and interact effectively with other people.
This brilliantly illustrates the difference between dense scientific data and everyday life. I mean, when we talk about interpersonal intelligence firing in the frontal lobes, it sounds super clinical, right? But think of a relatable classroom analogy. It's that one kid on the playground who instinctively steps in to organize the chaotic rules of a recess game. They make sure everyone gets a turn and they resolve disputes. That student is exercising a distinct, biologically grounded intelligence, practicing the exact same frontal lobe skills that future teachers and leaders use every single day.
Now for Section 3, Logic, Space, and Nature.
This group breaks down into 3 totally fascinating, distinct capacities. We've got logical math intelligence centered in the left frontal lobe, which is your absolute powerhouse for scientists and coders. Then, utilizing a completely different part of the brain, the right hemisphere, we have spatial intelligence. This one is crucial for architects and pilots who have to navigate and create in 3 dimensions. And finally, there's naturalistic intelligence, grounded in the left parietal lobe, which is the defining capacity of biologists and farmers who intuitively read and understand the natural world.
Let's ground this one again. We so often associate spatial intelligence with highly formal roles like architects and pilots, relying on their right hemisphere. But bring it back to the classroom, this is the student who might not be taking verbatim notes, but instead they're constantly doodling incredible, perfectly scaled 3D shapes in the margins of their notebook. They are thriving visually and spatially rather than verbally, and that showcases a totally valid, independent form of brilliance.
Next up is Section 4, Movement, Music, and Self. This grouping really shows just how wildly diverse Gardner's theory is. It includes bodily kinesthetic intelligence, driven by the motor cortex, which is essential for surgeons and athletes who require extreme physical precision. Then there's musical intelligence, rooted in the right temporal lobe, found in brilliant composers. And finally, intrapersonal intelligence, again utilizing those frontal lobes, but turned inward. This is what drives the deep self-reflection of philosophers and writers.
Think about the bodily kinesthetic capacity in the motor cortex for a second. In traditional education, this often looks like the classic restless student who simply cannot sit still at a desk. Yet, put that exact same student in gym class or a hands-on shop class, and they absolutely dominate. Their brilliance isn't lacking. It's just expressed purely through physical action and movement.
They're relying on a completely different biological pathway than reading a textbook.
All right, Section 5, the rules of intelligence.
So how did Gardner actually determine that these specific 8 made the cut? Well, he didn't just guess. He used really rigorous criteria for a valid intelligence. First, there must be brain damage evidence, meaning an injury can isolate and impair one specific intelligence while leaving all the others intact. Second, the existence of prodigies who show extreme natural talent in one specific area. Third, it must have an evolutionary basis. And fourth, it must have psychometric support. This proves this isn't just a fun theory, but a robust model backed up by hard evidence.
And our final stop, Section 6, moving beyond standard IQ.
To build this pluralistic model, Gardner explicitly rejects Spearman's G. For a long time, psychometrics relied heavily on this idea of G, which is a single general factor of intelligence that supposedly dictated how smart you were across the board. Gardner's pluralism completely discards this outdated reliance, replacing it with the expansive view of those 8 independent capacities we just explored.
And that brings us to the ultimate critique. Gardner's model argues that standard IQ tests are fundamentally flawed. Why? Because they primarily only test linguistic and logical capacities. Think about it. If an exam only measures the processing power of your left temporal and left frontal lobes, it completely ignores the vast majority of human potential living in the rest of your brain.
So, we've walked through the entire map of the human mind, according to the theory of multiple intelligences. We've seen exactly how biology dictates 8 very different ways to interact with the world. I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Now that you've seen the map, and you know that standard tests might have only been measuring a tiny fraction of your brain, what kind of smart are you? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring your unique capacities.